So, hello and welcome to today's webinars about capability maps. And this topic of today is, I think, a quite exciting one because there are so many discussions. If you look on LinkedIn and you post something on capabilities, and if you're part of the small enterprise or business architecture communities, there are lots of opinions about this topic and a lot of confusion. And we look, and when we look what's out there, we can certainly say that the whole practice is not very mature because there's a lot of confusion. And with the webinar today, we want to bring some clarity and tell a bit of our point of view and the way we want to reframe it. So it's about a next generation. That's a bit pitchy, but yeah, so I think there are some fundamental changes needed to position this concept. But first of all, some words about ourselves, myself. My name is Wolfgang Göbel, and I'm the president of the Intersection Group. I used to call myself an enterprise architect, but after 15 years, I was quite frustrated with a very limited impact and with this small IT point of view and this business people not listening and not following the architecture. You know, probably if you're part of the enterprise architecture community, you might have experienced similar situations. So I was frustrated enough to launch. Initially, it was called architectural thinking. Now it's called Intersection Group because we merged. What we're doing now is we're merging concepts coming more from the architecture, enterprise architecture world with concepts more coming from the designer world. And we help people create better enterprises. I will say a few words about this at the end of this show. Yeah, and the slides and the video will be sent to all registrants after the show. So if you are part of the business architecture community or enterprise architecture community, and probably many of you are part of these communities because other people are not so interested in attending capability webinars. So let's assume that you have some experiences and you know what's going on and you know what bodies of knowledge are saying. So the question is, what went wrong with capability maps? And right now you can go to the internet and you just Google the term, and what you will find is exactly this. So, and you see colorful, ugly, quite IT-centered, and most of the stuff you will find on the internet is published by companies that produce enterprise architecture tools or by people doing enterprise architecture consulting. So as a summary, we believe that capabilities still live in a small community only, and they are not very present outside the architecture communities, and that's a pity. And what you also don't find in books, you find some practical advice in this book, for example, but you can't really find good practical design patterns. And when you go to the internet and you look for capability maps, you will find that people totally differently use them and decompose them and design them. Quite often they are ugly, so people are not so keen on alignment of boxes and colors and so on. And we believe we must change that. Yeah? So the big question is, what went wrong and what we changed? For example, in some bodies of knowledge, they say, hey, a capability should always be based on information objects. So for example, this is the best tennis player. This is from Austria, my country, Dominic Thiem. And if I would follow the advice of some bodies of knowledge, I must call this tennis racket management, because some bodies of knowledge say, hey, capability should always be designed around the information object. For us, this makes them IT components. We focus on information and object orientation coming more from the IT guys. But the consequence, we believe, is that this exactly locks the concept of capabilities inside the tiny IT community. And with Intersection Group, we want to change that. We want to make this a true business components. So that means that we say capabilities should not be designed around information object, that they should be designed based on what offers highest cohesion. That means it leads to common language. Always use the language the business people use. Yeah, right. You can consolidate the terminology, of course you shall, but it's not a good idea to call this tennis racket management when everybody calls it a serve. And what we want to change, capability present everywhere, not only in the small business or enterprise architecture, ivory tower. And that we believe, we are strong believers that this could lead to a true and seamless business IT co-design. So make one step back from business IT alignment. We should have an approach that co-designs it in a seamless approach. Business capabilities should not be the concepts of the IT people, of course not. And as what I see today, usually they are. So in one slide, what we want to change. We want capabilities to be business components. If you have read this excellent book, Design for Digital by Jeannie Ross and Martin Mocker and Cynthia Beth, they use the term modular business components, reuse. So we must bring the idea of modularization that comes more from the engineering and the IT world, right? So we are so keen on decomposing software into classes and modules and components and so on. The concept is almost absent in business today, we must be aware. And with bringing the capability concept to the business and enable organizational designers, process people to use them is a big step out of the IT tower in the direction of modular business components. And then we believe that organizational structures like teams and org units and IT structures such as logical application components, IT platform, can be derived from this master structure. So I call it master structure for the first time because we believe that it's possible to have something, cells of a business if you want, if you design them right. And when you focus on capabilities first and then derive and think in org structures and teams and in IT structures, we believe that's a fundamental paradigm shift. Not many organizational designers even know the concept of capabilities. They have their business functions, right? If you want to understand what are the cells of the business, so what's going on? It took us 2 years until we came to the conclusion that everything that goes on in an enterprise can be designed and described by only 4 elements. So this is called a Wimmelbild in German. So this means a messy picture, maybe in English. And what you see on this picture are multiple businesses, right? So there's a company that operates the train, and there's a company, a railway company that operates the infrastructure. Usually it's a different company. And then there's this small business, Süßkram, that's a candy store, right? And that it might be a small business, really somebody sells some candies. And you see a lot of people, customers, and employees, you see a lot of things and you see a lot of activities. And we believe that everything is about people performing activities to achieve outcomes. So everybody wants to achieve something. Yeah, I want to get from A to B. That's an outcome for the passenger. I want to drive the train. That's an outcome for the train driver, of course. And you need things, right? So these are the 4 elements, everything you see. And the reason and what we say, well, these modular components of the business, no matter if you call them capabilities, activities, business functions, tasks, whatever, there are several terms out there, but you cannot discuss these concepts. So we believe that these business components consists of people performing activities, using things to create outcomes. And this is quite fractal, right? You can decompose it. You can say, okay, that's my huge company. And of course, we have thousands of people performing thousands of activities, but you can break it down in sub-activities. Of course, you can decompose it. Yeah, you could say, hey, that's the capability of billing. I have a billing department and they perform the activity billing using maybe a software system like SAP or so to create a bill. And there's an output and that leads to an outcome. And the smart thing and the elegant and beautiful thing is that not even enterprise architects cannot discuss this concept. It's just a discussion how we call it. Yeah, we can say is a business capability. I have the capability to do something, and that's where we want to go. So the idea is to finally come up with a concept and a seamless design approach that help people to structure the business in true adaptive business components. And we also have a definition. I know there are many definitions out there from Bespoke, from Toga, from Gartner, I don't know, OMG, many different places. We've had some discussions in our community. And after that discussion, we came to the conclusion that we want to say, to define them. A capability is what we can do by orchestrating people and assets. So it's a boundary about people and assets, and you want to co-design this boundary. Of course, which people, which skills do I need, which assets, how can I engineer these assets? So the definition is simple, but the business design problem here is how to find those cells, how to define those boundaries. So you have building software assets, informations, machines to create some outputs. So we can design capabilities for outputs only. Yeah, Dominic Thiem, for example, the output of his serve is a ball that hopefully hits the right part of the tennis court, but that doesn't mean that he achieves the intended outcome to win the match. So that means that's only an output. I think it's a bit tough to understand output and outcomes, but we currently believe that capabilities are about creating outputs that then later lead to outcomes. Together with assets. And what I often see in the digital transformation and IT communities is that quite often people forget about the physical stuff. So, and also if a business architecture is driven by an IT mind, so the physical asset, the buildings, the machines are not very present there. Of course they are, but don't forget about the physical stuff. They are very important in designing those capabilities. It's not all about software. And so an asset is a thing that is valuable or useful to somebody, something, and you always need some assets to have an activity, right? You need a tennis racket if you're a tennis player. You need to have an office and a desk and the software to create a bill and so on. That's pretty trivial. And so these are some types, classes of assets, if you want, we have in our current framework, in our current Agile language. So you have machines, buildings, raw materials, information, software application, and software technology. And that's, of course, a fundamental part in capability design. So let's have a look at it and an example. Yeah, capability is a kind of a boundary. So I like this. So this is a bubble, yeah, and inside of this bubble, I have the building officer. That's a person with a certain skill, and an office. That's a physical thing. That's a building together with a computer. That's another asset. Together with a software running on this computer. That's another asset. And they need some electricity and some information. So the travel route, for example, that's an information this railway company needs to build the railway company that travels around the tracks. And this is quite straightforward. You compose that, you orchestrate that, and that's trivial, this example, but in practice, it's the core of the design challenge of business design. Which capabilities do we need to build? What are we capable of doing today? Let's have a look. Yeah, people are usually not that aware. And if you do it that way, what we do is we bring the idea of IT components to the business world. So these are business components, if you want. And this is an example for a capability map for a railway industry. So yes, capabilities are boxes in boxes. So what is different in our approach compared to what is on the internet? We believe that beauty is very important, alignment of boxes, colors, but okay, that's trivial, but important. We believe that the structure of the top level, so for example, you have customer interaction on top, yeah, you have train operations, you have railway infrastructure management. So we have a certain idea how to structure those boxes, but there's still a lot of discussion going on. Usually when I do capability modeling, I start with some customer interaction capabilities, so like passenger services. Yeah, we must be capable to sell tickets, to provide passenger information, to do some freight services. So this is a category of capabilities, if you want. And below those boxes, we have the more operations. These are the core capabilities, or what you need to run the core processes if you are used to the process terminology. So for a railway company, this is train operation. So we must create a schedule for the trains. Then we must prepare the trains to drive the trains. And there is a train restaurant inside this run train capability. So that's the train ride, if you want. We must be able to do some energy management because the trains need some energy. And for that, we need to operate power plants to trade energy and so on. So these are capabilities we need. And as you can see, it's a hierarchy. Yeah, that's typical. Capabilities are usually done in 2, 3, 4 levels of hierarchies. And what we have on the right side, we believe it's usually a clever idea to have something like support capabilities. In process management, they call it support processes. Yeah, you can also call them reuse. So these are capabilities you want to reuse across shared services. That's also a term. Companies always have human resources in a separate department quite often, and IT, and so all these typically shared activities, shared capabilities. Usually they are teams and also organizational units. So that shows that when you do a clever capability modeling, deriving the organizational structure is a quite straightforward thing. Yeah? You have the capability to do human resources, and you usually have a department for doing human resources. It's not one-to-one, but we will discuss in a second. And then we have another category, the change capabilities, that's inspired by a professor, I think from Stanford or so, Mr. Thiese. He says, okay, you need something to run the business, and it makes a whole lot of sense to focus your attention to set up capabilities for constant change. And those capabilities are innovation, enterprise design, if you want, enterprise architecture, where to invest, investor relations. So that's everything you need to do to change and to adapt to the ecosystem constantly. And with making them an explicit category, we focus the attention of those people. So that's an example, the way we want to use capabilities. Let's dive deeper a bit into, okay, how is this related to organizational unit design? If you read existing bodies of knowledge, they say it's something totally different. And for me, this was always puzzling because I don't understand. Hey, I always have this capability to have human resources. They call it human resource management because they say, okay, a human resource is an information object, and so we must call it human resource management. I don't believe that. We just call it what it is. It's a task, it's an activity, it's a capability. Yeah, so we believe activities are actually performed capabilities. And so our current thinking is that organizational units are like overlays over capability structure, but you should always start your thinking and your enterprise design, how to structure your operations and how do you structure everything that goes on inside your company. You should co-design people with their skills together with assets and IT systems in a seamless approach. This finally closes the business IT gap. That means there is no the IT design, this componentization and finding IT platforms and standard software and so on. The whole stuff enterprise architects are doing today is then merged with the people usually driven by executive management or human resources that think about the org hierarchy. It's astounding that today there are two different design disciplines and that this is done in total isolation. Yeah, because I always thought, well, my logical application platforms, the way they are modularized and the interfaces they should have, the data interfaces, are something completely different from the structure of the teams, and they are not. Yeah, and the thing is, if you model those capabilities as business components, and then in the next step say, okay, what does it mean for our team structure? Maybe we need a team in a different geographical location. So it can be, of course, that you have a ticket sale, that you have a team to sell tickets in Lisbon and another team that sells tickets somewhere else. So the org chart is, of course, not one-to-one the same as the capability map for several reasons. One is geographical location. Another thing is size. Usually, if you group people in teams, you don't have teams with 500 people. So you usually have also other aspects. So it does not mean that it's one-to-one, but start with capabilities. And then we believe in that there are design patterns how you should derive your organizational unit design. And together with some members, we're also working on that, right? To understand what does it mean? How is the org structure related to the capability design. And a lot of confusion that is out there comes from terminology. So what's the difference between an org unit? Okay, that's a group of people, that's simple. An activity, so they do some billing, a capability. So I'm capable to do the billing. I'm capable to play tennis. What's the difference with playing tennis? We believe an activity is an actually performed capability, or it's an applied capability. But what we think is there should be one and exactly one decomposition of the business. And a lot of today's problems are the result that you have usually a process management department, and they structure the business in core processes and support processes and in activities and so on, usually far away from business reality, because these guys are more driven by legal and compliance issues than by enterprise design challenges. And then you have the org structure that is done by executives most of the time, and they use their power and say, yes, I can impose the org structure because I'm in charge, I have the power to do so. But they don't design them, they structure, right? And they usually don't have enough wisdom, knowledge about all the dependency between the tasks and the activities and the capabilities, if you want. To come up with a sound capability design means to understand what's going on, to observe which activities, what are we capable of doing today, and to observe how people pass information and parts. So how are the departments, the group of people, how do they pass information, how do they work together? You must observe that to understand the dependencies between what's going on. And so we believe that it's not a good idea to structure an organization in the way it's done today. And we want to bring the concept of capabilities to the world of organizational design, to the world of executive management. It's not present there. It's just living in a very tiny community of enterprise architects. Let's stay aware. And there are business functions, yeah. And I know many organizational designers use the term business functions, quite synonymous with activity, right? So you have usually, you have org units, teams, and they perform some business functions. So for them, billing might be a business function, but for us, billing is an activity that is an actually performed capability. So we say organizational units have capabilities, and that's a clear English sentence. You cannot really argue against that. Yeah, organizational units perform activities, and that's again natural language. Please, you can on LinkedIn, when I post this video, please write some comment that this is wrong. It's not, because it's quite natural. And then we say activities are actually performed capabilities. And this is a small sentence, but this is a big message, right? Because this means that we only have one structure, and the capability map I've shown you, we could also and easily call this an activity map. So what's wrong with calling them activities? I prepare the train, I have the capability to do so, and it's an activity, and there are zero reasons to have two decompositions of the business in processes. For that, that's what's typical, right? So the people decompose in processes and somebody does it in capabilities, and that does not match. Finally, we say what you see here can be a capability map, because capability means something we envision for the future, so that we can have a future state capability map that is not an activity map, because it's not actually performed. And it could always also be that a railway company has capability that are currently not performed. And so in that way, they are slightly different, but the basic structure and the basic terminology is the same. And the terminology is driven by the natural language of the business and not driven by tennis racket management and to be forced inside a precise terminology that is uncommon. We are aware that we can only bring it to business and make it to the world. So at the end, we want to make capability-based planning, capability maps, a tool that everybody uses, like business model canvas. It's the logical next step connection between things like business model canvas that did it to the whole world. Everybody does business model canvas. Nobody does capabilities. Why? Because there's so much confusion and because there are conflicting concepts overlapping, and it leads to a lot of confusion at the business side. Yeah, and the big question here is how to design them. It looks simple. I mean, what I presented so far, I hope that it's easy to understand, straightforward and obvious, even for people not so deep in the business architecture space. We believe it's not needed to write something down in 500 or 700 pages, like in prevalent bodies of knowledge. The idea is pretty straightforward, yeah, but a tough question, and it's not solved yet. And for me, this is also astounding that after a decade of business economic sciences and business schools and so on, nobody really has a sound answer how to design it. When are the grouping goods? Why do we choose this kind of boundaries? Why do we decompose it and bring this structure to life? How does it? And we have some of the answers, but not all, of course. So we are keen on working with the community, so also with you guys. If you have feedback, we will publish this soon, and you will be able to get feedback. So we are really eager to get feedback on that and your design patterns, but we have something for the beginning. We believe that groupings are good when you achieve loose coupling. And this is a term, engineering term, an architect's term, but my experience is that business people can understand the term when I show to them a picture like that, because I say, oh, on the left side, we have teams of people. You can say this boundary is the billing capability. It's the billing department, maybe. So you have a group of people that work together a lot, and they talk to each other. There's a lot of interaction, and they have similar skills, and they have the same software and so on. So they have a lot of stuff that belongs together because they need to work with it on a daily basis. There's a lot of interaction between the people and the things. And outside of this capability, outside of this business component, we want to have few interactions, clear interactions, because that enables adaptivity. So means we want to enable companies not to become agile. So business agility is on the top list of many companies. We believe that's a totally flawed idea to call it agility. We believe in business adaptivity. And to become really agile, you must be adaptive. Means you must have business components that are adaptive. So this idea, we engineers know it from software and from engineering hardware and so on, that you have components and they should be loosely coupled, because then you are more adaptive in your software. They also apply for organizations. They also apply for teams. And on the right hand, it's clear that it's maybe not so a clever idea to have two teams of people together with machines and assets. So departments, teams, capabilities, if you want, that are tightly coupled, and you can observe that. So when I go to an organization and I'm new in the company, I usually ask people, let me observe what you're doing. And it's astounding when you just observe how they pass information. You can really quickly find out flaws in the organizational design, which is a flaw in capability design from our point of view. So tight coupling is not a good idea. So we believe in loose coupling. But loose coupling by what? So what are the things, how we could group it? And I really like this picture because it shows, well, there are different species of flowers. There are different shapes of flowers. There are different sizes of flowers, different colors. So what is the criteria that are used to say this is similar? Is it the color? Is it the size? And in this picture, usually, I think it's species, yeah, but you could also say, yeah, it's color, because some species have similar colors and so ever. So must be aware that you must find a criterion around which you group that stuff. And one step back from flowers to the real railway industry, what could this mean? For example, I've been working for Austrian Railways, and that was truly the capability. They must set up the capability to flatten the track. So it means there are huge machines, you see them on the bottom here, together with highly specialized people like this nice guy. So this is the driver. It's like a train, and they drive quite slowly across this rail. And then you have large poles, and they go like boom, and then the gravel comes up a bit. And with this machine, they are able, I don't know, this is fascinating. They can make this plenary. So this is, they must be exactly a plenary. and horizontal, because otherwise the train would go like that and get damaged. Or you can imagine what happens when a train with 300 kilometers per hour passes a train that is not 100% flat. And what you see here is that the element that drives cohesion is a highly specialized machine. It's a highly specialized task. It's about, and in reality, in Austrian Railways, they had an organizational unit that operated this flattening machine. So in that case, the asset is the reason why we group these capabilities into flattening tracks. So that means, think of specialization. Yeah? People say specialization is bad, it leads to silos. I don't think so at all. Silos are not evil if well designed. Specialization has, of course, it's part Taylorism, right? And these guys are highly specialized. This machine is highly specialized. So specialization leads to a thick, stable boundary of a capability, for example. But there are other categories. And if we go back to this capability model, usually assets, yeah, so the blue groupings are capabilities that are designed around assets, preparing the train. So there's this huge machine, this huge train, and I need to prepare it and I need to drive it. So the name of this capability is prepare train, drive train, run train. That's an asset, that's a machine, and the criterion is train. But of course, you can also decompose it by verbs, by activities. And the green, for example, these are decomposed about activities. That means building project management or construction site planning. If you do project management, what they decided is, well, the project managers, the skill they need, they are quite similar. So they have high cohesion, and we want to have a team of project managers. We have the capability to do building project management, and we apply these capabilities. We reuse it for stations, for tracks, and power lines. So what you see here, we have these three capabilities. Building and maintaining station is very different from building and maintaining tracks, building and maintaining power lines. So these bubbles here are again driven by assets, but the green are driven by activities. And so these are orthogonal. And when you do capability-based planning, it's always an intentional design decision. And the question that leads your design is, what belongs together most? So is it true that project management is very similar, regardless if you do it for stations or for tracks? And if you say, yes, that's similar, it might be a good idea to have a specialized team that does project management, is a shared capability for stations, tracks. And if you say, for example, like energy and energy trading, yeah, is it the same thing to do project management for the power plants? And they said, no, because they have the capability, energy management. They need to operate power plants to build them. And they decided, well, power plants are buildings. So we, in theory, could say it's building project management, but power plants are very different from usual buildings. We need specialized experts. So be aware that this question that guides your capability design, what belongs together, what offers highest cohesion, is a very big question. And you will always, and usually these are decisions that are made in the org chart. So the people structuring the organization in teams apply them, but usually not with enough knowledge about what's going on today, because they structure it. And we've seen a lot of top-down reorganizational projects where people are frustrated. And if you follow the idea of business components and always asking together, how can we reduce the amount of communication flow of physical parts between those entities, then you're on the right track, because then you start designing, then you have systems. If you're in systems thinking, each of these capabilities or activities can be seen as a system that is consistent of people, assets, and things, and performing activities. So if you have systems that are loosely coupled, this leads to adaptive enterprises. And that's not what happens today. Today, executives structure their departments, and that's quite frustrating. And that's, for us, the reason for this chaos we have in business and the chaos we have in IT application, because IT side thinks, hey, we need to modularize on ourselves. No, it's just derived from capability structure. Yeah, I said a few words about the groupings. Yeah, currently we just say the top level groups are very important. Yeah, because they focus the attention. As I mentioned before, customer interaction, I usually do that because it's important to say, hey, what do we need to build? Which capabilities do we need to get better at for customer satisfaction? Because customer first is a big topic. And then we have operations, and we always say, yeah, and please make explicit what you reuse, what you share, what you the support capabilities and this change. So, but this is just one possible way. So you have customer interactions, what you need to get in touch with customer, operational, what do we need to create the product? So typical manufacturing, warehousing, yeah, that's the same as in business process management, the core processes, if you want. Shared support processes, change processes. But there are more ways. And if you read some books and some papers, I found 7 or 8 ways to do that. Yeah, some people still think in management, core and support. I'm not super happy to have management as a separate discipline. Maybe it's not important enough. So I'm not happy with this one. Some do it process driven. If you have this value stream, Porter's value chain idea, and some people also structure capabilities. We plan something, we build something, we run, and we learn. Makes sense, has some problems especially in companies that offer a broad variety of products, because usually building a motorcycle is very different from building a car, like if you're BMW, and maybe it's better to decompose by product category, and you have a capabilities produce car and produce motorcycle, however. Yeah, you have ordinary dynamic, that's teaser, however. So the message for today is, well, we have a clear recommendation that you please use the top level categories wisely, and that there's more than management core support, and that plan, build, run, learn. So this value chain driven approach has some flaws, because usually capabilities get quite abstract. If you say, oh, that's planning, yeah, if you try to apply this to a railway industry, and it gets really vague, and it does not lead to the best business components you want to have. And another thing is, do they fall from the sky? Why do we need capabilities? And what you see here, that's the current draft of our, what we call Agile language. There will be a webinar in a month or so, product oriented, right? We believe the reason why a company exists is we create some products and we sell it to somebody or offer it to people that get it for free, for paid price, whatever. So of course you must know your business model and this business model canvas, and you must explore the ecosystem. That's the red. So what's going on around me? What are the people demands? What are the tasks people want to have achieved? That's the red facet. That's the experience facet. But I think that if you have a designer group that calls themselves product designers, service designer. That's what I see today. So they are specialized people, user experience designer, service and product designers. Yeah? Usually they are deeply embedded in the business. And they do some product design. Usually they are not fully aware about the current capabilities. And there's a huge gap, and we want to clean that. But if you're a startup, for example, and you think about your product, what does make sense? You have zero capabilities. So if you're a startup, you might have an investor and some money, and you start things up. So then you can maybe think about, what's my purpose, my vision, what's the product? And then the next step is, which capabilities do I need to set up? So the arrow here comes from, I need those products. Okay, that means I need to produce something. I need to do logistics. I need to partner. I need to get information. A lot of stuff, you know that. And you should not make the mistake to think in organizational structures. Please think in capabilities first. So what do we need to be capable of doing? And this leads to the question, which asset do I need for that? For logistics, for example. Yeah? So I need some logistics. Do I set up the capability on my own? Do I outsource it to a logistic partner if I want to do logistics on my own? I need some trucks, maybe. Do we want to do that? Because that means some costs. So capability-based planning and assets leads to this resource-based view, and then we get connected into the money issues. Yeah, can we afford to do that? So this is the process of budgeting and so on. And you can do this, all of that, using this capability concept. And which processes do we need? So processes for us are a sequence of capabilities, a sequence of activities. But you should think capabilities first and a needed asset, including IT. Yeah, means what do we need to be capable should be first, and not which software do we want to buy. Of course, it's important to have a feeling what software offers to understand what we can get capable of doing. So the reality is not as waterfall as I am telling you today. And the next step is the organization. And for me, this is the big message for today. Yeah, product capability, and that leads to IT and physical assets and the organization. Please, if you're a startup, don't set up the organization without thinking capabilities first. And if you're driven by legacy, so it means you're an existing company, of course, it does not work top down because you have existing strengths. What I see in usually companies are not aware about their awesome strengths. So I always recommend, and do it in my jobs, start with the capability map, talk to seasoned experts and assess those capabilities, heat map them. Where are we good at? What are the flows between the capabilities? Then it becomes a bit more in the direction of process management. Where are flows between capabilities, departments, if you want, that go back and forth that way and that go in 700 direction. I see that very often. So examine the existing activities to understand the capabilities of the company, and what we are capable of doing today must affect what we want to achieve tomorrow. So that means if you want to launch a new product, companies usually, in my experience, usually take too little time to dive into what are we good at today. And maybe it's better to have a sound understanding about what we are capable of doing today. And maybe I can orchestrate, recompile existing capabilities, existing assets into new capabilities that we can use for new products and so on. But product designers should stop designing the products without a sound understanding of capabilities. And capabilities, existing capabilities, of course, are related to existing assets. So if your IT structure, and for us this is an asset, is weak and has technical debt and is extremely expensive, then of course this reduces your possibilities enormously, because you cannot, if you are a zebra today, you cannot transform into a monkey tomorrow, if it's a good idea from the product designer's world. Yeah, what I often see is that product designers have cool ideas, but not often feasible, because of legacy, because of a lack of existing capabilities, because of a lack of existing assets and these things. So how to model them in a summary? We believe categories are very important. We have customer focus, operational, shared, change. But this categorization scheme is not finally discussed. There are other, we are not done with that. This is the one and only way to do it. Maybe in your company, something different works better. We also think it's dependent on the industry. For some industries, some categories work better. If you are a monopoly, customers might not be as important. So context matters. If you have a broad variety of products, maybe this porter value chain approach in plan, build, run might not be sufficient, because you must have more specialization in the capabilities. And this leads to the point, make products visible. I've seen so many capability maps, and I was unable to say, hey, is this a bank? Is this an insurance company? Is this manufacturing? Because they were so generic. Yeah, you can have a capability model that says, manage people, plan activities, build activities, run activities. I believe that the major product groups must be visible somewhere in the hierarchy. Yeah? For example, if I'm BMW and we produce motorcycles and cars and convertibles, and we have different product groups, they are quite different. Yeah? Probably, if they are, I'm not sure, but if you have very different products, it's a good idea to have different capabilities and not say have a capability that's called plan and build and run stuff. Maybe it's better to have the products on level one. But again, this is a question of highest cohesion. So are the products similar enough to say, hey, it's a similar capability, we treat this as one? It's always the question about what belongs together most. This leads to the third point here, right? Group around what offers highest cohesion. An object, a process, related skills, these things. Limit redundancy. That's also other bodies of knowledge says this, and also IT world. If you have components, you want to have, you want to reduce redundancy. So you don't want to have teams that have overlapping accountabilities. Maybe for some reasons, for geographic reasons, that's a different story. But for example, when you have data ownership, you might have a capability that produces and owns certain informations. It's not a good idea to have redundancy here. Embrace specialization. Silos are not bad. Silos are excellent if you design them in a proper way. Embrace reuse. That's the reason why we have this shared category, to nudge people into the thinking about, hey, what can we reuse? We want to have reuse because reuse makes a lot of sense from business side, cost side of view, of course it does. Use their language. Yeah, use, as you have seen, I've used HR, human resources, not manage human resources. And it's much shorter. It's common terminology. Everybody knows. So why should we follow a strict naming convention? We don't say that's not a good idea because you lose business people. If you don't speak their language, they don't use the capability maps. That's for sure. Focus on the essence. So maybe for a medium or larger company, you have 5 level 1 capabilities, 10 to 20 level 2, 50, but these are just raw, some advices, maybe not that exact, but maybe not a good idea to have 6 levels and thousands of them. Then that's not the granularity you want to have, because what you want to do with this tool is to enable a collaborative co-design process, to enable organizational designers together with IT designers, together with product designers, to co-design those capabilities. That means you need to focus on the most important stuff. You need to speak the language. You want to have everybody on board, not only a small business architecture community. So for that reason, we have the bar is very high for essence, beauty, their language. It's a communication tool that finally enables people to co-design. And what I always do, and it's also maybe the final recommendation for today, never do it on your own as the one and only enterprise designer or business architect. It's always a broad elicitation process, because you need the wisdom of a broad variety of business experts. So what I usually do, I take a 1 month or 2 months or so to understand what's going on. So I have a look at the existing org charts, and then there you find business functions and what's going on in the business. And then you can have a look at the web page. You can see about the products. You get an understanding what's going on in the company. And then I have a look about the process models. They are a good source, but be aware that they are not the reality. But you will find some terms, you will find some capabilities, you get an understanding what's going on. And with this first information, I take my pen and a sheet of paper and I start drawing a model, a capability model, just for myself, because that's a summary of my understanding. And at this moment, I'm starting to find dysfunctionalities in the org chart. It's really easy to find them. If you compare the org chart with existing process model and you think about similarities, and if you're a bit trained in business analysis and so on, then I start to draw a picture that might be less dysfunctional, but not complete and wrong, because at this moment, I don't have enough business expertise. And that's the moment where I usually go to what I call seasoned outliers, business experts that have been around for 3 decades or so. And when you talk to these people and when you present to them, hey, that's my understanding, that's totally dysfunctional. Why is this org structure that way? That's a very good way to build the trust you need. And you ask questions, and then you show that you do a lot and that you're curious about the business, and you ask questions. That's one of our patterns we have in our book. Yeah, you ask questions and you get all the wisdom, or not all, some of the wisdom of the business experts. And this makes your model richer and richer. And usually I talk to 5, 6, 10 people, depending on the company, and in various departments across the whole business. And then I say, okay, this is my current understanding. And with each interview, it gets richer and richer. And then I go to application owners. This might be surprising. These are people that know the software, the IT applications very well. So they know what's going on. And it's always interesting because you see a lot of reality there. You see terminology in the user interfaces, which terms are used in the menus, in the user interfaces, for example. Which data do they store? How do they call their information entities? How do they talk about train schedules? There are 15 kinds of train schedules in the railway companies. How do they name it? And is this consistent with the org chart? Is this consistent with the process model? No, never. It's never consistent. That means what you see here is this lack of this one model everybody agrees on, right? Somebody created the org chart, somebody else the process model, somebody else the product model, and the implementation is something very different, because software developers, domain-driven designers, they say, hey, I'm the reality because it's part of the software. And then you have a lot of conflicts. And all I can do is, at this moment, I try to model a capability map that is as clean as possible, as clear as I can make it in my head. And I play it back to the business experts. I do some feedback loops. It gets better and better. And then I have a quality where I can have enough certainty to go to executives, to B-level, heads of departments. And that's the moment where it goes boom. Politics. You must be very careful when you leave the business experts level and you go to the executives, because these guys are usually aware about the dysfunctional department structure, because they structured them in a hierarchical way. They have their interests. They are not always acting in the best interest of the company. So that's usually my task, if you want to do as an enterprise designer and come up with the best capability model that is best for the whole enterprise. That means a lot of conflicts on this B-level, executive level. Be careful there. So you must be really convinced. And usually I take the position of a neutral coach. I just show, well, this is the model. I don't understand. There's a conflict. Aren't you guys doing similar stuff here? Does this make a whole lot of sense, right? And then be careful. It happened once to me that some people cried on me in anger. No, Wolfgang, that's not the same. I've been working in the railway industry for 30 years and you're new. That's not the same. Finally, it turned out it was the same. So I was right. And I just unveiled something he wanted to hide to the next level of the hierarchy, because my finding usually is that the guys that are on top, the C-suite, they are interested in transparency most often, because they see themselves, they have the whole enterprise and they want to make it operate as good as possible. They want to have the best experience, the best architecture, adaptive. They don't like all the battles the level below, and they want to get rid of it. And so the huge challenge is that you become the friend of the C-suite, because your job capability modeling is a topic for the C-suite. It's deeply embedded in organizational modeling. But I've started in the IT ivory tower, right? So this journey is not easy, and it's highly political, but it's doable. It's doable if you do it with an attitude of a coach, and if the culture, the corporate culture allows to do it. So means that this cycle I have here works in some contexts, and other companies just don't like change, or some companies don't have the culture to be transformed. But then we can't help, and they can't transform. It's as easy as that. So if you don't manage with a cool approach and you show problems in the org structure, in the org design, in the capability design, in the way the business works, and nobody listens to you, maybe you're doing something wrong. Can be, of course, it's a highly not such an easy job, but maybe the culture just doesn't allow it. And then we have in our pattern book, the pattern number 11, leave. It's a good idea to leave toxic cultures, and we can't heal every company. So what you've learned in this section, my final slide in the content here, please, let's start thinking in one decomposition of the business. Please stop having processes, capabilities, org units, business functions, and so on. We should have one decomposition in business components. We call those business components capabilities. Start from existing docs, what I've shown you. Usually they are excellent sources. Run a broad elicitation process. Capability modeling is a team effort, and we want to make it broad because people must own co-design, must be invited to a broad process, because it's not mine, not my thing. It belongs to the company, represented by the CEO, if you want. Enable business to own their capability design. I believe that it's possible after maybe 2 years in a company that it does not need an enterprise design coach like me anymore. So it's always what I want to have is that after 2 years or 3 years, I want to enable the business to own and co-design the capabilities. My experience is here, it's not that difficult, and the people are already doing something like that, but they don't have the concept of cohesion, componentization in mind. They believe it's the org chart, we need to structure, it's about power. And the only thing what we say is, no, think in business components that are an orchestration of people that perform activities to achieve outcomes. And these are your capabilities. These are your capabilities. You are the business experts. I'm only a facilitator. I'm only a coach. And when you can do it on your own, you do architectural work. So what happened in my presentation today, I enabled those guys to do architectural thinking, to do architecture, enterprise architecture. I'm a firm believer that enterprise architecture should and must be done by the business experts themselves, and we must make it simple to do that, and we must get rid of those huge bodies of knowledges and meta models with 35 elements and so on. We must make it easy and bring the concept of architecture, in that case, capability maps, to the true business owners. Design for highest cohesion, I said this several times today, yeah, together what belongs together. Think about it. Is it a machine? Is it a task? You always have the decision, shall I group by a same task or the same thing, for example? It depends. If the things are similar, you can have the task, and if the tasks are so similar and the things are very different, might be idea to make it differently. Select categories with care. We made some suggestions today, but we believe we are not finished with this discussion. Categories should be based on context. Layout for beauty sounds obvious, but go to the internet and Google capability maps, and let's see if this is aligned and if the terminology is clear. And sounds obvious, but beauty, I believe that beauty is the only means to connect disciplines. It's not concepts, product design and enterprise architecture and process management and SWOT and so many different disciplines don't meet these days, and that's a pity. And we believe it's because of a lack of beauty and a lack of clarity and a lack of a simple language. And this simple language is what we will provide with Edgy soon. So we want to travel from business IT alignment to a true business IT co-design. And at the end of my presentation, only a few things about who we are. I mentioned that we are a not-for-profit association with the only goal to help people create better enterprises. And when we say not-for-profit association, we mean it, because Austrian laws are quite strict. It might be different in other countries. We are not allowed to make profit, and that's not the idea. The idea is to make some money via training. So we also offer trainings and we offer publications, and all you've seen today will be published soon in our flagship product that will be called Edgy, and this will be announced also soon. But what drives us is the community of world-class thinkers, and this is a very diverse community. We have a lady from the community of organizational design, Naomi Stanford, and she's awesome. She's been working in the field of organization design for decades. And her recent book about organization design, it's so close with our thinking recently. So I think we finally will make a seamless bridge between the world of organizational design enterprise design, IT design. It's all about finding business components that derive, that drive all the other structures. Yeah, and other people we have various backgrounds, so enterprise business architects, experience designers, service designers. If you're interested more in this red facet, experience design, there will be a webinar next week. And together with this community, we not only have discussions, we produce content. And the first content, the first stuff we created book was the book called Enterprise Design Patterns. So in this book, I think we laid a foundation for what we call a collaborative enterprise design approach. So we have 35 patterns that help you to have more impact on the business. Because what I've learned from all co-designing disciplines, that they are frustrated because they have limited impact. Enterprise architects never get the impact, never get the decisions they need. Product designers don't have the impact because the products or the services are not feasible, and they are only seen as the people doing the colorful pictures. So everybody is frustrated, and this book we want to relieve this frustration a bit. And we run communities and events. So we have these weekly webinars. Next week, Milan will be talking together with Jim Kalbach, who is really a big name in the user experience world. And today I was talking about the inner DNA, the inner cells of the business. Next week, we will change the perspective and we'll look to this company from the outside in view to become a truly customer-driven enterprise, an enterprise that is driven by user experience. I didn't talk much today, but of course, our capabilities must be designed in a way that provide the best possible experience for our customers. So that will be the topic for next week. And there will be other webinars around service design. So we will soon have these storytelling webinars. Milan will start with a service designer, and then I will tell a story of Ernestine, the enterprise architect, a lady that starts deep inside the IT and makes her way out from this typical IT enterprise architecture pitch to have more and more impact and to become more and more impact on organizational design. So this is, if you want, what I've told today, told in a story, easy to follow, which steps to go. And then Naomi Stanford, one of our advising members, tells a similar story from the human resource department. The people, the person, Odile, the lady, starts from the human resource department and has the task to redesign the organization. And after these 3 stories, we believe that those people will meet in a co-design space and say, okay, what have we learned and how can we make this a seamless approach? And capabilities will be one, not the only, but one of the key concepts to do so. Yeah, and then we have our Milky Way webinar with Annika and Milan and the release of Edgy 1.0. So this will be a huge product launch in the 2nd quarter this year, where we have capabilities and the specification and the language, how capabilities, the topic of today, are connected to other elements of the enterprise. Yeah, the final advertisement, if you don't have it, so the book is of course a good idea. So you can buy it on enterprisedesignpatterns.com. It's quite simple. It's not simple. It's clear. Let's say it's clear. It's slim. We believe it helps a lot, no matter what kind of designer you are, no matter if you're an IT or service designer. But we will talk about the book in upcoming webinars, so stay tuned. Okay, so this completes my webinar today. Thank you all for the attention. It was a pleasure to talk about capabilities. For me, this is an exciting topic, as you might have recognized. I can get quite passionate, and I think there's a huge change ahead. Yeah, the huge change from a chaos between business and IT design, from structuring frustrated people, from org design imposed on people, to a true collaborative co-design of capabilities, of organizational units derived from capabilities, and of IT structures. So thank you for the attention, and I hope to see you in some upcoming webinars. See you. Bye.